Uber and Lyft drivers, what's your most NSFW story? Picked up this very tall and somewhat muscular looking black girl carrying what looks like a tackle box. She was dressed somewhat risque. Gets in the car and I said hello. She responds with a pretty deep voice. We started the trip and she was telling me that she was on her way to do makeup for one of her friends and her phone rang. She answered the call and it started off pretty standard. I wasn't really paying attention. Suddenly, I just hear, "Girl, what are you worried about? You have a great looking." Alright then. Where's this going? "No, Derek is just super sweet. It'll be fun, I promise." "No, girl, he's just gonna come through the doors." "Yes, I'll be there. I'll be outside the doors as one of the topless guards. Anyway, he's going to pan through doors, focus in on you and the bed. Just start playing with yourself. Nothing you haven't done before." Yes, after a few minutes of doing that, you call for the guards and I come in and we bang. Yes, I brought the strap on. It's in the makeup box. And that's the story of the person planning their adult video during an Uber ride. Story 2. My friend told me about a couple who got into his car. They were slightly drunk, talking nonsense to each other, so he didn't pay much attention. Just kept driving and occasionally checking on them through the rearview mirror. Eventually, the girl got quiet, so he checked in the mirror and didn't see her. And my innocent friend thought she was asleep and even laughed about it with the guy. Well, not long after that, he passed a speed bump and heard the guy saying, "Oh crap!" At the same time, a gurgling sound was heard, and a smell of booze filled up the whole car. So yeah, the girl was going down on her boyfriend, whatever. The speed bump caused her to deep throat and vomit all over the back seat, and my poor friend still had to drive around with a vomit-smelling car. At least they rated him 5 stars. Story 3. There's a photo of this on Reddit that I posted when it happened, but I can't find it right now. Not me, but a friend who also drives in my city picked up this drunk girl on her bachelorette at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. She was going like 4 blocks, but was so drunk she passed out the second she sat down. He pulls off, and about 30 seconds later, she craps in her sleep. She's wearing very short shorts, so it just falls out both sides. Being that she's passed out, he drives her to her hotel anyway, with the windows down trying not to vomit. When he gets there, she kinda wakes up, and in the process of getting out manages to smear crap on his back seat, on the back of the front seat, on the inside roof, on the outside roof, and on the door. She says, "Sorry," throws him $20 and disappears. Uber gives him $250 to clean his car, charged to the crapper. The next day, he gets an email from Uber saying she called them all pissed off because why did she have to pay a soilage charge when she already gave him $20 to get the car cleaned? Story 4. Wasn't really NSFW, but on my second day doing Uber, one of the clients was on house arrest. Dave. Now, Dave was a cool guy. He wanted me to buy him some wine and smokes from the gas station. He even trusted me with his card and PIN. When I get back, I decide to just have a smoke with him. That turns into us doing Tai Chi in his backyard at 2 a.m. Really cool dude, Dave was. Hope he turned his life around. Story 5. I picked up a client who said he was on his way to the hospital to get something removed. And I'll be honest, it was very clear by his movements that he had something stuck in his butt. I asked if he needed an ambulance instead, but he said he didn't have insurance so he couldn't afford it. After I dropped him off and helped him in, I got back in the car and looked to find a blood stain on the seat. The morals of the story are 1. If you're poor, don't shove things in your butt that can get stuck, and 2. Never get light gray upholstery in your new car. Story 6. I was in Santa Ana, California, looking for a guy I was supposed to pick up. He lived in a large cul-de-sac with a small park in the center. It happened to be later in the evening when I went to pick him up. I go through the cul-de-sac once, pretty slowly as I can't find his house. I decide to do a second round of the cul-de-sac, and when I get a quarter of the way around, 2 guys emerge from the park, and one of them pulls out his pistol and asked, "What the F are you doing in my neighborhood?" I decide to act really calm and just let him know that I'm with Uber and was unable to find a passenger, and I told him who I was looking for. He says, "Oh, you looking for a random name? He's at the top of the cul-de-sac, blue house." I thanked him for his help and canceled on my rider. Screw that. Story 7. I don't drive for either of those companies, but I had a pretty bizarre fare once. I picked up a guy and a girl midday Saturday for a short ride, couple of kilometers. The girl seemed drugged out of her mind and was wearing somewhat revealing clothing, so it was pretty clear they'd been partying the night before. While driving, I picked up their conversation, which they were not attempting to hide. It was pretty clear that the guy had a girlfriend who was not this girl in the car, and that he just hooked up with this girl. They were currently heading to his girlfriend to explain what happened. To be clear, he is bringing the girl he was unfaithful with along to explain to his girlfriend that he just banged her. I mean, he tipped well though. Story 8. Not exactly NSFW, but definitely my favorite story. I picked up a couple in their 30s on St. Patrick's Day this year at 2 a.m. They wanted to take about a 35-mile drive at 6.3 times surge, so I was about to give the third highest paying fare I'd ever given. Great way to end the night. They had clearly been drinking like they were 20-something since early in the day. The wife, in the front seat, was super apologetic for the first 5 or so minutes, completely embarrassed about their level of intoxication, while the husband, in the back, was trying to be my new best friend. After 5 minutes or so, the Sandman paid them a visit, and they both passed out. I drove for the next 20 minutes in relative peace. When we arrived in their driveway, the husband was sound asleep, and they had a half-inch of wet snow in their driveway, so I took the wife inside first. While on the way in, she upended her purse in the snow, but I was more focused on getting her safely inside. Once we got in, I helped her to the bathroom and then went to the garage to get a snow shovel. I cleared a 4-foot wide path from the garage to the car so I could get the husband inside. He's a bigger guy and I wanted to be safe, and I finally got him awake. I gave him my shoulder and got him inside. He begged me, "Please, just get me to the recliner. I can't make it to bed." So that's where we headed. All the while, the wife is throwing up with the force of a small waterfall in the bathroom. I ran outside and grabbed the contents of her purse, which included her phone, absolutely soaked at this point, and came inside. She begged me to rice her phone, so I started to dig through the cupboards for a bag and rice. While digging, I came across their meds and pulled some for them. I riced her phone and then gave them both Advil and water and told them to take more in the morning. They were gonna need it. Then I locked the door and showed myself out. In the end, I was dropping them off for well over half an hour, but the fare was awesome and the day was my second best day of driving, so it didn't really bug me. The kicker? They left me a 5-star review the next day. Pretty okay guy, is what it said. Best ride ever. Story 9. A mate of mine drives Grab, which is basically a Southeast Asian version of Uber. Once picked up a guy and 3 girls. Turns out the guy was a pimp and the girls were all his workers, and the 4 were being tailed by the cops for illicit prostitution. And so my friend was basically forced to be involved. Long story short, they got stopped by the cops and my friend explained that it was his birthday and they were going to an orgy for his birthday. And no orgy for him, but he did get a nice tip though. Story 10. Not a driver, but a story told to me by a driver after dropping off his previous passengers. This was when I was at uni. I couldn't bother waiting for a bus home, so I hired an Uber. Luckily, there was a guy nearby dropping off a girl and guy. I knew them, still Facebook friends with them. They got out and I got in. I said hi to them and we chatted a few seconds. They said they were going to study for a bit and then go to the library to meet up with her boyfriend. I was tired, so I just told them to have fun and I'd see them in class the next day. The driver overheard most of this talk and said he was surprised the girl had another boyfriend. I asked why, and he said that she and the guy who were just with her were being very flirty, touchy, and kissing on the way over. I was gobsmacked a little, saying, no, that's impossible. I laughed a bit and told him he must have imagined it. He said, no, he saw them being very affectionate with each other. I'm just sitting back there shocked and not knowing what to say. He said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your friend might be a little loose if she's cheating on a boyfriend. I'm still trying to process what I've been told. A little while later, he drops me off at home. Before I get out, I tell him, I'm sorry I seem a bit shocked, but my friends, the guy and girl you just dropped off at the uni, they're brother and sister. He was like, no way, are you serious? Almost as shocked as I was. I wasn't completely sure whether or not what the driver told me that day was the truth or not. For a while, I convinced myself he was BSing me and knew they were brother and sister, but I noticed other stuff afterwards that kinda confirmed it. Story 11. I work for a company similar to Uber. Oftentimes, you have to play therapist for drunk customers. They will lay out very personal details about their lives to you. One customer told me about how her ex-husband has been hospitalized several times due to complications from alcoholism, and that they told him the next time he comes in, he'll likely die. She told me that she really hopes that the father will die before her 17-year-old son turns 18, because she doesn't want him to have the responsibility of having to decide to pull the plug. Another ride started with the customer asking if I played Overwatch, and within 5 minutes she was crying and telling me about her friend who committed suicide. One ride, I couldn't find the window button. We drive the customers home in their own cars, and so the customer reached over for it, very clearly moving her hand across my groin on the way. She also refused to sign her check unless she could write her number on my arm, and slapped my butt as I walked away. Another customer asked me for change, and I handed it to him as his other hand was on his dong, peeing in his front yard. Another customer, whose car interior was absolutely covered in cigarette ash and butts, told me about how her daughter recently got hooked on drugs by her boyfriend, and how she hates black men because her black father left her as a child when he went to prison. I could go on. Story 12. A few months ago, this lady came into my car whilst busily talking on her phone. Yeah, you can't tell anyone on the team yet. No, I haven't told anyone at all. I was secretly eavesdropping, as I usually do, trying to figure out what kind of job she had. The details are kind of gruesome. The poor thing was lying there for a while after it happened because there was no one around. These bastards took everything from her and tried to steal her car, but they apparently ran over her and they just booked it. Her body was practically split in two under one of the wheels. It was only a couple hours later someone saw it and called us. She was still alive when we got there. Hey, listen, I gotta go. We'll talk more soon. We had reached her destination, church. She got out of the car with a quick thank you. Story 13. If it counts, 20 plus years ago I drove for a sedan service. I picked up one of the Temptations and took him to get drugs and an escort. It certainly wasn't safe for my work at the time, but everything worked out okay. He came out of a luxury resort and gave me a sketchy address. When we arrived, it was an abandoned convenience store, so he told me he was looking for some company. Yeah, I knew where to find that, and along the way, he said he was gonna look for some medicine too. So we stopped in the ghetto and got him something to smoke. Could have been anything. I don't know. I didn't ask. After being told, "Screw you, cop," more than once, we found a pretty young lady of the evening. He asked where she's been all night, and she said she's been right there waiting for him. She got in the car, they kissed and groped in the back seat on the way back to the resort, and he gave me a decent tip. Story 14. This one isn't really NSFW, but it's the reason why I stopped working for Uber. It's about 10:30 p.m. I get a request and accept it. It's a 20-something-year-old girl just getting off work at a retail clothing store. She needs a ride home, about 35 minutes outside city limits. Cool. Long ride equals more money. Get her to her house, she gets out, and I drive away. Now, I'm about 25 plus miles away from the city, so I don't really expect to get any hits out here. I'm about to head back when I get another request. This one is another 30 minutes further outside the city limits. Maybe this person wants to go downtown. That's an hour-long ride. So, I'm down because of money. Start heading their way. It's a beautiful night, so I cruise the whole way with my windows down. Long, winding, narrow roads, no street lights for miles. Finally, I come across the property. It's a ranch-style place. I turn in. Still no lights. Pitch black. I drive in for about 2 miles with no sign of a house. I'm doubting my GPS at this point, but oh well, I'm already this far. Keep going. Oh cool, a house. No lights on. Something doesn't seem right. I swing my car around to face the exit, leave my car in drive, and rest my foot on the brake, just in case, and then waited for a while. Nothing. Let me give this guy a call. He answers and sounds confused. Hey, I'm your Uber driver. I'm outside. Take your time. I'm here whenever you're ready. Uber? I didn't request a ride. I'm at number, Texas. Your address and information comes up on my app. Texas? I'm in Indiana. I've never been to Texas. Please don't charge me. And then hangs up. In that moment, I felt the already pitch black night get darker. I turned down the radio. My window was still open, and so I started listening. You know that sound of a dirt road when somebody's walking on it? How it crunches and you can hear every step? Imagine that sound, but there are 2 sets of feet, and they're running, getting louder. I look out my rearview mirror, and the only light is from the red parking lights of my car. 2 men, all black clothes painted red by my brake lights. Sprinting, getting closer, getting louder. I slammed on the gas. My car threw pebbles and rocks at them as I semi-burned out, and I hauled as fast as I could out of that property. Got back on the winding road, followed it all the way to a well-lit gas station, shifted to park, and sat there, stunned. What just happened? I tried following up with Uber, but nothing really came out of it. To this day, I'll always have to wonder what happened that night. Story 15. I've had a scary moment like this too. Driving down a dark road at night, suddenly in front of me, I see 4 guys spread, covering the whole width of the road. As I get closer, one appears to be holding a 3 to 4 foot chain. I slow down, but only so much because there's no way in hell I'm stopping for them. The 2 in the middle have to jump out of the way, but I'm not risking my safety for them. The scary thing is, a few people I've told this story to have said they'd stopped not wanting to hurt others, but in my mind, it's defensive driving in a sense. Story 16. Not an Uber/Lyft driver, but I did drive for a taxi company. I had a fare where 2 drunk people who were making out in the back of my cab. Now, this isn't unusual on its own, happens quite often, just gotta stop them before it gets, out of hand. Well, one of them decides to stop making out and says to me, "Don't tell anyone, okay?" Curious, I ask why. He responds, "We're cousins and we don't want our family to find out," and then went back to making out again. I didn't once think they could have possibly been cousins. Never saw either person before or after. Could have just kept his mouth shut and I'd never known. Why did you have to disclose that information to a stranger? Story 17. This wasn't me and it isn't NSFW, but I still think it's worth sharing. One driver told me that this one time, a guy got in his Uber without putting in the destination. This guy was in his mid-40s. 40s, wearing an all-black suit and wearing sunglasses. Didn't take them off, and he also had a briefcase that he put on his lap. Anyway, he sits in the car and points forward, so the driver takes off. They didn't speak the entire journey. It was about 40 minutes. To tell the driver where to go, the passenger just pointed left or right. Anyway, the driver tells me that he was crapping himself the entire time and genuinely thought that he was going to die but was too scared to stop. So they finally pull over at this really big, old house that he described as the most mafia-looking house I've ever seen. The guy takes off his glasses, looks at the driver, and says, "Thank you very much." Turns out, he just had a really big stutter, and nothing else. Story 18. My cousin was a Grab taxi driver, basically an Asian version of Uber. So in Thailand, we have a TV show called Hormones, which is like Degrassi or Secret Life of an American Teenager. And they had a scene where kids were banging in the backseat of a taxi. Apparently, these kids wanted to try it out just like in the show. They were white, by the way, so we found it funny that they would try it, and started making out and taking off items of clothing. My cousin said he stopped looking once they started taking them off, but he overheard the girl getting frustrated that the guy couldn't get hard, so she put on her clothes and left the car furiously. Then the guy just asked him to take him home. Story 19. Not exactly an SFW, but still a crazy experience that happened to my brother. He's a Lyft driver, and one day he was picking up an OR nurse from work and taking her home. She lived kind of far away, so they needed to take the freeway to get to it. They start chatting, and my brother starts talking about when he was a baby he had open heart surgery at the same hospital that she works for. Funny enough, this nurse has been in the OR during many open heart surgeries, so she knows a lot about them. She starts talking about them and eventually goes into pretty graphic detail about how it's done. Now, my brother has this problem where he passes out very easily when discussing or seeing medical procedures. He's done it 3 times before. Once when he watched himself get an IV, once from seeing the pin in his toe after he had foot surgery, and once while they were discussing how to put a catheter in during EMT training. He wanted to be a firefighter. So, as predicted, after a little bit of hearing about the surgery, the nurse notices the car veering off to the left, crossing over a lane. She looks at my brother and sees him passed out cold behind the wheel. She starts screaming and the car ends up veering off into a ditch on the side of the freeway. The nurse apparently forgets all her training and just books it once it stops. Apparently, the smell coming from the deployed airbag smelled like smoke to her and she thought the car was going to blow up. My brother and the nurse are both physically fine, but his car is completely totaled. Story 20. So, my dad is an Uber driver, and he says that girls my age, I'm in my early 20s, will drunkenly try to make him go home with them all the time. One time, there were 3 girls who were drunkenly singing to Taylor Swift, and they made my dad record them singing the song, and then made him sing some of the lyrics. He showed me the clip of them singing and him singing later, and it was hysterical. Then they invited him to go to the next bar with them, but he had to keep working. Also one time, an Uber driver told me a girl tried to drunkenly make him hook up with her at her house, but he said no because he's married. And when she got out of the car, she gave him the middle finger and turned around and lifted up her miniskirt and flashed him. I guess Uber drivers get a lot of ladies or something. Story 21. Happened about a year ago, but I had Ubered a girl from the university in my area. She was pale, freckled, blue-eyed with dirty blonde hair, and had a single dreadlock twisted in it. We chatted for a bit about our goals and interests in life. She seemed really down to earth. When I brought up that I made music, she asked me if I had any songs I could show her. I put on my most played song that I had at the time, and more than half of the song consisted of her commentary on how much she loved it. Considering how gorgeous this girl was, I was a bit more than flattered. She tells me to keep it on my SoundCloud and asks me if I had ever gotten head while listening to my own music. I tell her no and that I'd been single for a while. Her response was like, music to my ears. Well, there's a first time for everything, right? At this point, I'm praying I don't crash my car with the jolt of endorphins rushing through me. Long story short, I blew my load before we reached her destination, and let's just say she was no quitter. I got her number, but nothing ever evolved beyond that. She still listens to my music according to SoundCloud. Story 22. Not totally NSFW, but I just this Friday picked up 4 college-age guys from a bar around 1:15 a.m. who were on their way home and teetering on blackout. It was a surge fare of 1.8 and a ride of about 8 miles of mostly highway, so I was pretty pumped to make an easy 10 to 20 bucks in 15 minutes. We finished the bulk of the ride when the most intoxicated of the group springs to life and says, "Dude, do you want Taco Bell?" I think he mixed a request with a statement that he wanted Taco Bell. I said sure, as I wasn't going to be staying out much later and thought it was sure to yield a tip in cash. So I take them to a little plaza that contains a gas station, a convenience store, and of course a Taco Bell. This is when that same guy sprung to life once again to say, "No drive-thru, let's go in." I told him no, but he said he'd give me $10 if I waited, so I reconsidered. They step out of the car, and this guy huddles his friends for a few seconds before they break off into three directions, as the drunkest guy half slumps and leans against my back bumper. At the same time, one rushes the Taco Bell and returns with four $5 boxes. Another hits the gas station and comes back with White Owl cigarillos. When the final man returns, it's with a roll of paper towels, some sort of rivet things, and sticky tack. The drunk guy then unravels the entire roll and shoves it into one of the barf bags that I keep in my back seat, and they get into the car for the last 3/4 of a mile home. Drunk guy is fiddling with it in the back as I talk with the guys about sports and other banalities until I pull up to the house they live in about 2 minutes later. As I pull in, the drunk guy says, "Done!" and then slumped onto his buddy's shoulder. He hands me $10 and grabs the bag containing the paper. He looked me right in the eye and with an incredibly serious tone, he broke through his intoxication for one sentence and said, "You must always remember to recycle," and then passed out to the point that his friends had to carry him. I then got to see what this blacked out genius was up to. It was a device for smoking multiple blunts that was so precisely made. The holes were equidistant, lines were clean, etc. They invited me in to test it, but I had to be on my way. As I drove off, I wondered what this person would be like in the light of day. What does a sober version of this stoner engineer do? What else is he capable of?